Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us. As soon as we learned of the new Omicron variant, this government acted, introducing targeted and proportionate measures as a precaution, whilst our scientists discovered more, and we're learning more every day. We don't yet know Omicron's severity, its exact rate of transmission, nor indeed the full effectiveness of our vaccines against it. But since I last spoke to you, it's become increasingly clear that Omicron is growing much faster than the previous Delta variant, and it's spreading rapidly all around the world. 568 cases have been confirmed through genomic sequencing across every region of the UK, and the true number is certain to be much higher. Most worryingly, there is evidence that the doubling time of Omicron in the UK could currently be between 2 and 3 days. And while there are some limits on what we can learn from South Africa because of the different rates of vaccination, different rates of previous infection, we're seeing growth in cases here in the UK that now mirrors the rapid increases previously seen in South Africa. And South Africa is also seeing hospitalizations roughly doubling in a week, meaning that we can't yet assume that Omicron is less severe than previous variants. So while the picture may get better, and I sincerely hope that it will, we know that the remorseless logic of exponential growth could lead to a big rise in hospitalizations and therefore, sadly, in deaths. And that's why it's now the proportionate and the responsible thing to move to Plan B in England, while continuing to work closely with our colleagues in the devolved administrations, so we slow the spread of the virus, buy ourselves the time to get yet more boosters into arms, and especially in the older and more vulnerable people, and understand the answers to the key outstanding questions about Omicron. So, first, we will reintroduce the guidance to work from home. Guidance to work from home. Employers should use the rest of the week to discuss working arrangements with their employees, but from Monday, you should work from home if you can. Go to work if you must, but work from home if you can. And I know this will be hard for many people, but by reducing your contacts in the workplace, you will help slow transmission. Second, from this Friday, we will further extend the legal requirement to wear a face mask to most public indoor venues, including theatres and cinemas. There will be, of course, exceptions where it's not practical, such as when eating, drinking, exercising, or singing. Third, we'll also make the NHS COVID pass mandatory for entry into nightclubs and venues where large crowds gather, including unseated indoor venues with more than 500 people, unseated outdoor venues with more than 4,000 people, and any venue with more than 10,000 people. The NHS COVID pass can still be obtained with 2 doses, but we will keep this under review as the boosters roll out. And having taken clinical advice since the emergence of Omicron, a negative lateral flow test will also be sufficient. As we set out in Plan B, we will give businesses a week's notice, so this will come into force in a week's time, helping to keep these events and venues open at full capacity, while giving everyone who attends them confidence that those around them have done the responsible thing to minimise risk to others. As Omicron spreads in the community, we will also introduce daily tests for contacts instead of isolation, so we keep people safe while minimising the disruption to daily life. And of course, we will take every step to ensure our NHS is ready for the challenges ahead. But the single biggest thing that every one of us can do is to get our jabs, and crucially to get that booster as soon as our turn arrives. 1 year to the day since the UK became the first country in the world to administer a COVID vaccine into the arms of Margaret Keenan, we've opened up the vaccine booster to all those over 40, and we're reducing the gap between second dose and booster to a minimum of just 3 months. Our heroic NHS staff and volunteers have already done almost 21 million boosters, including reaching 84% of all the eligible over 80s. But we need to go further and faster still, because our scientists are absolutely confident that your immune response will be stronger if you've been boosted. And while you're at it, please get your flu jab too. Let's do everything we can to protect ourselves and our loved ones this winter and to reduce the pressures on our NHS. As we learn more, so we will be guided by the hard medical data around 4 key criteria: the efficacy of our vaccines and our boosters, the severity of Omicron, the speed of its spread, and the rate of hospitalizations. We will constantly monitor the data and keep it under review. And of course, we must be humble in the face of this virus. But if, and indeed as soon as, it becomes clear that the boosters are capable of holding this Omicron variant, and we've boosted enough people to do that job of keeping Omicron in equilibrium, then we will be able to move forward as before. So please, everybody, play your part and get boosted. I'm now going to hand over to Chris to do the slides.
Thank you, Prime Minister. First slide, please. I wanted to situate this initially on where we are with Delta, because what's happening is Omicron is coming on the back of a still high rate of Delta transmission and hospitalisation. So in the first slide, what we have is the number of people testing positive for COVID in the UK, and that has been drifting upwards, not at a very rapid rate, but it has been drifting upwards. The Omicron data aren't really going to be visible in this for a few days, but they will become visible over time. Next slide, please. The number of people in the hospital with COVID in the UK has, because of the booster vaccination programme in particular, been drifting down until this point in time, with the numbers going into hospital reducing, although that's now stabilised slightly. And that's really because the boosters are particularly going to protect and are protecting people who are in the highest risk categories, as the Prime Minister has said. Next slide, please. And the number of people in the UK who are dying has again gradually been decreasing over time, but is still a daily average of 121 deaths from COVID. So we still have a significant issue with COVID, and I think anybody who speaks to anyone working in the NHS would say that is on top of an incredibly busy system. Next slide, please. In terms of our major countermeasures, of course, the biggest one, as the Prime Minister has said, is boosting. And this is steadily increasing. So we now have over 1/3 of those who are eligible have already had a booster, and they are, by and large, the most vulnerable third. But there's still people who are in higher risk groups who have not been boosted. And of course, we have to move down those groups. And that is going to become absolutely critical, we think, as we move on into a period where Omicron becomes significant and probably then becomes dominant. Next slide, please. And if this is just a data just to show quite how effective, with the variants we've had to date, vaccination can be. And what it compares is, in the dark lines, the hospitalisation rate in the blue-black bars in those who are unvaccinated, and in the orange bars, those who are vaccinated with 2 doses. This is largely protecting against Delta. But as you can see, at every age, a really substantial improvement in your protection. Next slide, please. So now we move on to the data on Omicron, and these are data probably people have seen versions of in media over the last few days, but I think they do need fleshing out a bit. So these are the number of people testing positive for COVID-19 in South Africa. At this point in time, the big increase in COVID in South Africa is virtually all the Omicron variant. And this is now spread all around South Africa. And as you can see, this is an incredibly steep increase in rates. And we're now seeing this translating into increases in hospitalisation. So, for example, I was talking to some of my colleagues from South Africa this afternoon. and they were saying that informal data still to be added to, but there was around about a 300% increase on hospitalizations over the last week. So some of those will have come in with Omicron, and some of them will come in as a result of Omicron. But the fact is those numbers are going up very sharply. Next slide, please. So what's happening here in the UK? Well, I'm afraid that the data here are now clear. What you can see here is the number on the left, and on the right the percentage of cases with what's called S gene target failure. This is a marker for Omicron. Virtually all the cases now who've got this marker will have Omicron. A very small number at the bottom will not. And as you can see, whether you look at the absolute count or the percentage, this is going up incredibly fast now. And as the Prime Minister has said, this is doubling at this point in time. It may slow down, and the aim of the measures announced by the Prime Minister is to slow things down, but it's doubling currently between 2 and 3, every 2 and 3 days. That is an extraordinarily fast rate, and you therefore can get, with very small numbers to very large numbers, really quite quickly. Now, the question obviously people reasonably want to ask is, will this feed through to people in hospital, and how quickly? And I think I'd just like to just point out two realities. First of all, the first one is a good one. At the moment, the spread is in younger people who you would not expect to go into hospital, and it's once it starts moving up the ages and into vulnerable groups that you'll start to see that. So there will be a lag as it moves into more vulnerable groups. And then we know from previous waves, and this is not particularly surprising, that there is a delay between people becoming infected with COVID and ending up with symptoms and then with hospitalisation. So there's usually about a 2-week delay. We would therefore not expect that these cases, that the case rates in hospital will start to go up for a number of probably 2 to 3 weeks. And in that period, if you're doubling up at the speed we're talking about now, we move from very small numbers to really substantial numbers, and it will keep on doubling. And that really is the reason why these measures have been announced by the Prime Minister as agreed by ministers today. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chris. Patrick, anything you want to add? Okay, good. Well, let's go to members of the public then. Dave from Chester.
Are mandatory vaccinations being considered, like they are in the EU and other global nations? And if not, why? Why is it acceptable to put measures on our freedoms, but not that on our vaccination statuses?
Thanks, Dave. Well, I said right at the beginning of this pandemic that I think, or as soon as we were really talking about vaccination seriously, that I didn't want us to have a society and a culture where we force people to get vaccinated. I don't think that's ever been the way we do things in this country. And actually, Dave, we've been able to achieve through the voluntarism of the British people, through their incredible public spiritedness, willingness to roll up their sleeves and get vaccinated, huge numbers, huge proportions of our population. I think that there is going to come a point if we can show that the vaccines are capable of holding of Omicron, and that's the key thing that I think that we need to test. Well, I do think that we're going to have a conversation about ways in which we deal with this pandemic, because I want to be absolutely clear with you. I don't believe we can keep going indefinitely with non-pharmaceutical interventions. I mean restrictions on people's way of life. Where just because a substantial proportion of the population still, sadly, has not got vaccinated. And I think we're going to need to have a national conversation about the way forward and the other things that we can do to protect those who are hard to reach, who haven't got vaccinated for one reason or another, who may have medical reasons why they can't get vaccinated, other ways of protecting them. But that is a stage that I think we will come to if and when we establish, as I hope that we will, that the booster is effective against Omicron, and the booster is capable of holding Omicron, getting us back into that equilibrium that the double jabs got us into with Delta. If if you follow me. So it's at that moment that I think we will have to talk seriously about moving on from the way from thinking about further NPIs and thinking about other ways in which we protect people. Rachel from Essex. Rachel asks, why can't fully vaccinated British travellers stuck in red-listed countries self-isolate at home when they return instead of a hotel? Quarantine hotels are too expensive, especially as this was implemented at short notice, not giving travellers a chance to get home. Well, Rachel, I think that's a very fair challenge. I think that given the way Omicron is now seeded around the world and not just in red-listed countries, I think we will be looking at the red list and the way that we do it. But it's been very important in the immediate period, the immediate response to Omicron, to have very tough border measures to slow the arrival of the variant in this country, and that was the objective of those measures, and continues to be the objective. I mean, Chris, Patrick, anything you want to add to that? Okay, then let's go straight to Laura Koonsberger, BBC News.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. You're tightening the rules again for millions of people tonight. How can you stand at that lectern, exactly where some of your team laughed and joked about COVID rules, and tell people they must now follow your new instructions? And are you really asking the public to believe that you had no idea what was going on under your own roof?
Actually, the first thing I want to say, thanks very much, Laura. The first thing I want to say is that I know that today Allegra Stratton has resigned, and I wanted to pay tribute to her, because she has been, in spite of what everybody has seen, and again, I make no excuses for the frivolity with which the subject was handled in that rehearsal that people saw in that clip, and there could be no excuse for it. And it was I can totally understand how infuriating it was. But I want to say that Allegra has been a fine colleague, has achieved a great deal in her time in government, and was a particularly effective spokesman for COP26. She coined the coal, cars, cash, trees agenda, and helped really to marshal and to rally the world behind the agreement in COP26. And I really, Laura, if you forgive me, I wanted to say that, because I think it's been a sad day for her as well, as an infuriating event for many people around the country. And on that point, look, I want to repeat that the fundamental point is that I think the British public, notwithstanding the point that you make, can see the vital importance of the medical information that we're giving, and they can see the need to take it to heart and to act upon it. And that point has been proved time and time again, and it's never been more conspicuous in the way that the public has responded to the vaccine rollout and the way that they've done the responsible thing. So I take my encouragement from the way the public have dealt with it themselves. Anushka Astana of ITV.
Prime Minister, you've only really agreed to an investigation into what happened on December the 18th last year because of the video that emerged from this room, and Allegra Stratton's resignation seems to further suggest that a party took place despite the denials. But we've also had serious allegations about parties on 3 other occasions. So I want to ask you why they aren't being investigated. Is it because you haven't been caught out in those cases, or is it because reports are true that you attended some of them? And to the rest of you here, can I ask how worried you are about whether this undermines public trust? Because the polling suggests that it does do, and Conservative MPs are openly saying that it's very hard now to mandate the public to act.
Thanks very much, Anushka. Well, I repeat what I said in the House and earlier today. The Cabinet Secretary will conduct an inquiry into the into what took place on December the 18th. As for other events that, other dates that you mentioned, as far as I'm aware, to the best of my knowledge, and we have followed the rules throughout, and that is what you would expect. Indeed, we followed the rules, as far as I'm aware. The rules were followed on December the 18th as well, and I just repeat that point. But it's clearly important that the Cabinet Secretary is able to get to the bottom of it. But in the meantime, on your sort of your global, your big point again, Anushka, which is really the same as Laura's, I think overwhelmingly the public see the importance of the messages that they are getting via this medium. It is imperfect. We do what we can to explain what we think is necessary. I know it's contentious. I know it's difficult, and I know that sometimes the messages are confusing. We do our absolute best to make it as clear as possible, and we do everything that we can to protect public health. That's what we're driven by. But Chris and Patrick, you were asked.
I mean, the measures work because people follow them, and that's been shown time and time again during this. So it's incredibly important everyone follows it. It's everybody. It was incredibly important throughout. It's going to be incredibly important going forward, and it only works if we all do it. And we're now facing a viral variant that's rapidly progressing. It's got a doubling time of between 2 and 3 days, and measures need to be taken to try and slow the spread of that variant, as well as, and I think this is important, us all boosting our own defences by getting a booster jab. So I think the rules are there, quite carefully thought through and given scientific evidence, and they're there because they're important and they're there for everybody to stick to.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, I mean, I think we all know that people get very angry, including colleagues and friends, and when they feel that it's unfair. And the Prime Minister said that in the House of Commons, and he's said it today. That's quite different from people, I think, wanting to actually know what's going on and then make decisions. And I think those two need to be separated. And the point about what we're trying to do is trying to actually say, look, here are the reasons. This is moving very fast, doubling every 2 to 3 days. It is too early for us to be absolutely confident about hospitalisations, but I think you've seen how things have gone before. That's probably the way to bet. And then if we're pleasantly surprised, no one will be happier than I would be, and Patrick and the Prime Minister. We know that it looked as if it was going to be able to evade vaccination, and now clinically we know that it can in terms of infection. So we know that is an issue, therefore the boosters become significantly more important. And we know that we're going early now so as to try and be able to slow this down at an early stage of events. And I think if it's laid out to people in a way that is reasonable, irrespective of other things, people want to know the logic as to why they're doing it, and I hope we're trying to lay out the logic of trying to do that. That's not in any way to try and move away from the earlier point, but I just think those two should be kept separate in people's minds.
Thanks very much, Chris. Beth Rigby, Sky.
Prime Minister, on Allegra Stratton's resignation, she resigned today. She looked broken as she did it. How did you feel when you watched that statement and watched what she said, heard what she said? And doesn't it lead to your leadership being questioned if others are taking responsibility for things that happen in this place instead of you taking responsibility? And to the scientists, people are going to feel pretty flat today listening to this press conference. They were told to get their jabs, to get their boosters, that we would have an irreversible path out of lockdown, that life would continue. Winter comes, we are now being told that we have to live with restrictions again. Is this just the reality of living with COVID? So this is not just another year this is happening, but this is our lives now for years to come. I think people will be worried about that. Thank you.
Yes, just Beth, first on your first point, look, I repeat what I said to Laura. I think that Allegra has been an outstanding spokesperson for the government, for COP. She did an extraordinary job, and I'm very, very sorry to lose her. And on your point about responsibility, I don't just take responsibility for things that happen in this building. I take responsibility for everything that happens in this government, and I've made that clear throughout the pandemic.
On the question about where we are now and what that means for the future. This virus has mutated a lot quickly, and that is sort of what you'd expect at this stage, that you start to see more mutations. This one's got a lot more than anyone thought would arrive that quickly, and that's what's caused so many concerns about it, spreading very fast. The good news is that so far it looks as though when you get very high antibody levels with the booster vaccine, it's definitely having some effect against it in the laboratory studies. We need to watch and see what happens over the next few weeks as we get more data on that. So the boosters remain incredibly important as a way of increasing immunity. What we're on is a road from pandemic to endemic, where this becomes a more sort of regular infection like flu or something over time, but we're in a sort of bumpy transition for that, and that's going to be difficult, and it is difficult now, and there are special measures that need to happen now to try and reduce the spread. It doesn't mean this is what happens in perpetuity. You would expect that over time this becomes a virus which then has peaks every year, just in the way that flu does perhaps, but it wouldn't be endlessly having new variants that always escape vaccines to some extent. You would also expect that the vaccine will need to change over time, just as the flu vaccine changes year on year, and you get a slightly different one because the thing continues to evolve a bit. So I think this is a surprise change that's happened. It's a big one, and yes, it's going to make everyone feel a bit sort of deflated about it, but there are things that can be done. I think the vaccines are going to hold up to some extent here, and I think probably boosters will really push that to a level that's going to be important. We need to test that and find out. And I don't think it's a harbinger of what happens hereafter. We will see more variants, and they will always cause some sort of challenge, but that challenge is the same sort of challenge that you're going to see year on year with other things as well over time.
Can I just add to that, because I mean I obviously completely agree. We're in a sort of transition period from a point when the pandemic first hit in 2020, where we had to rely entirely on social measures and had no medical countermeasures. We will get to a stage where we have multiple countermeasures, probably lots of different types of vaccines, antivirals we currently don't, a whole variety of other aids, which is the way we have dealt now with very many infectious diseases. We're in that midpoint. We are immeasurably better off now than we were with the vaccines we've got, with drugs, with better hospital treatment. There's a whole bunch of things that are so much better than they were. It will be much quicker getting over this than it would have been if the same situation had hit us a year ago. But we shouldn't, at no point have we said that there wouldn't be new variants, significant ones potentially, and vaccine escape ones. That's been said by almost every, I suspect every media outlet that's represented here repeatedly, and for good reasons. That's the biological inevitability. Now, when it comes to this particular, so in the long run, I think the outlook is good, but I think we have to accept that it's not, it is still a difficult period. And in terms of this particular variant, the question I think is really going to be, is this held by the current vaccines with boosters, or are we actually going to have to do a reformulation of the vaccine, at least for more vulnerable people, and that is what we will need to do over time. And it may be actually what we have is a transition period where the booster holds it for a bit, and that buys us time, and then we can actually get a specific or what's called polyvalent vaccine, and that will allow us then to, from later on in this year, be able to respond to it directly. So I think we should, in a sense, what I think we should say is I can see why people would feel deflated, but this is a kind of setback. This is not a situation where we're back to square one. We're having to just deal with it as we always thought we might have to.
Prime Minister, sorry, just to follow up quickly, you said that you were furious about the video you saw about the mock press conference.
Yes.
How did you feel when you saw Allegra?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Because of the huge press of meetings so far today, I haven't been able to see that, but I'm of course aware of what Allegra has said, and I just repeat what I said. I'm very grateful to her for everything that she's done, and I wish her all the very best, and we will certainly miss her here in government. But I just want to add to what Chris has said on this crucial period, because I think that there is at least a strong possibility that we will discover in the course of the next few days and weeks that indeed the combination of 2 jabs and a booster is capable of holding Omicron in equilibrium in the way that we want, and then as I said, we will be able to move forward. And it's always worth bearing in mind that what we're doing today with Plan B is something that we set out back in September. So this is not a deviation from the position that we thought we might find ourselves in as winter set in. We always reckoned that we'd see a spike in disease and in infection. Actually, Delta has been remarkably stable. The problem has been this sudden emergence of Omicron and the real spike that it's producing. And given the potential numbers that Omicron could produce, we just have to respond today in the way that we are. Pippa Crerar from the Mirror.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I thought I'd have another go at Anushka's question because I don't think you quite answered it. Can I ask why you've tasked Simon Case with investigating a party on December the 18th last year that you weren't at, rather than one on November the 27th where you gave a speech that you were at, in breach of the rules by any reasonable legal analysis? And further to that, will you extend the inquiry, Simon Case's inquiry, to include any other gatherings, events, parties, use the term that you choose, that took place in number 10 or indeed in your flat, if there's evidence of them?
So first of all, Pippa, this is a huge, as people know, this is a massive Department of State, and there are people working flat out the whole time, working on all sorts of issues, and they work extremely hard. And according to very, very well respected civil servants and advisors, special advisors that I've talked to about what happened in the events that you describe, no rules were broken. I've asked Simon Case to look at the other Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case, to look at the December the 18th event. I'm sure he'll be considering all sorts of things. But as far as I'm concerned, all the evidence I can see is that people in this building have stayed within the rules. If that turns out not to be the case, and people wish to bring allegations to my attention or to the police or whoever, then of course there will be proper sanctions. But in the meantime, I think what we should do is let Simon get on with, let the Cabinet Secretary get on with his job, and I'm sure he'll be making his findings public as soon as possible. Ben.
Are you restricting him to looking at December the 18th? I mean, that's the part of the question.
The guidance has been, and the rules have been observed at all times, and he's looking at the issue of the 18th of December. He may wish to look at other things. That's a matter, frankly, for him. Ben Riley-Smith of The Telegraph.
Thank you, Prime Minister. 3 quick ones. Tory MPs have suggested you pulled this announcement forward to bounce headlines about the Christmas party. Is that true? On Christmas parties and nativities, what's your message now to the country? Is it those should be cancelled? And there's no time limit at all to these new restrictions or when they might be considered. When do you think the earliest point that might be? Mid-January, February or spring? And a quick one for Professor Whitty, just picking up on your point about reformulating the vaccines. Do you think there's a real possibility a lot of people might need a 4th vaccine before next autumn to counter Omicron?
Right, thanks very much, Ben. So look, on the first point, we'll just imagine the counterfactual. Colleagues say, or people say that we're somehow making this announcement to coincide with events in politics. Well, actually, imagine if this step were to have been delayed because of political events of one kind or another. What would people say then? You've got to act to protect public health when you've got the clear evidence, and I think I'm right in saying that SAGE only met yesterday to discuss this. The evidence about the transmissibility of the virus has we've been watching it for days, but it's become, I'm afraid, unmissable, not just in South Africa, but in this country as well. And if you delay, as everybody knows, with a doubling time of 2.5 to 3 days, you see more doublings, and your position becomes predictably and inevitably worse and more difficult to recover from. On Christmas, the best way to ensure we all have a Christmas as close to normal as possible is to get on with Plan B. Irritating though it may be, it is not a lockdown. It is Plan B. It is what we set out a while back, and to get your boosters and get your jabs. That's the best way forward. And as for when we'll review the measures, Ben, which I think was your third point, as I say, no later than early January, and possibly before, if we start to get some of that really granular information. But we need to see the data and work on it pretty hard.
Sorry, just on the second, it was Christmas parties and nativity. Should
yes, sorry, no.
Do that.
Good. No, they should not. No. So thank you, Ben. No, in my view, they should not be. They should follow the guidance, of course, but we're not saying we don't want kids to be taken out of school before the end of term. Not that there's very long to go now. We don't want nativity plays to be cancelled. We think that it's okay currently on what we can see to keep going with Christmas parties, but obviously everybody should exercise due caution. Have ventilation, wash your hands, get a test before you go, a sensible thing to do. Give yourself or give everybody else at the party the confidence that they're going to be meeting someone who is not contagious. Those are simple things that people can do, but that's what we're saying.
On the question you asked me, I think it's far too early to be sure on this. A lot of scientists are doing a lot of work at the moment just to work out what the current 2 doses and different combinations of those and the booster will do with the Omicron variant. And that will help give us some information. I think until then, it's probably not very helpful to speculate. The exception to that is that there's a very small group, but a very important group of people who've got significant immunosuppression, who we're giving 3 doses to as their primary course. They will then get a 4th dose, which is essentially their booster dose. So in that group, the answer is yes. But in the great majority of people at this point, I think the answer is we'll have to wait and see what the data show.
Just to build on that, I mean, we've now got vaccine design that allows you to alter them quite easily, and to make, as Chris said, so-called multivalent or polyvalent vaccines against different variants in one go. Those are going to provide breadth of coverage in the future. When they'll be needed, we don't know. We've also got antiviral drugs coming through now. 2 have been reported recently, which have good effects. So there are increasing number of options to look at this, but, and this is important, going back to the timing point, SAGE met last week and met again yesterday, on both occasions, saying that this is spreading rapidly. You don't just watch it spreading rapidly, you need to do something. And that isn't just the boosters. The boosters are incredibly important, but it's also about trying to reduce the possibility of spread, which means reducing social contacts in order to try and achieve that.
Thank you. Emilio Casalicchio from Politico.
Thanks, Prime Minister. You just suggested that Simon Case could extend this probe beyond just this alleged party on the 18th. The Permanent Secretary for the Department for Education today said that that party that happened at DFE that they apologised for will be included in that probe. So obviously it's quite flexible. So would you encourage Simon Case to look at all allegations of all parties that might have happened in Downing Street last year? And also, would you commit to the inquiry being published before the end of the year? How quickly would you like to see it done?
Yeah.
And then I've got a question for the scientists, maybe all 3 of you. Obviously, you've just announced new restrictions, including a recommendation to work from home. Is the fact that we're here doing this now not a mark of failure? We should have fixed the roof while the sun was shining, surely, with the pandemic. Prepare the vaccine booster rollout, so it could have been done at lightning speed, but instead it's been quite slow to get this new part of the rollout sorted. Actually created a proper world-beating test and trace system, but it feels like we're still not quite there yet as well. We went through devastation last year, but it feels like we still haven't completely learned our lessons? And when are we going to learn? Because next time we might be hit by a virus that's much more dangerous than the pandemic. So are we going to be actually ready by then?
Right. Well, look, I mean, just can I get Amelia? Can I just go back on some of the things you've just said? I think it is worth people bearing in mind that there are a lot of countries in our immediate neighbourhood that have got restrictions already far tougher than ours and tougher than the ones that we're asking people to implement now, much tougher. And I think people should also bear it, and that's because we had the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, Emilio, just to remind you of that. And it is also the case, far from having a sluggish vaccine rollout, what we've now got is, I think, 21 million people having a booster. Right, we've now got 21 million people boosted, and again, I think I'm right in saying that we've boosted more people than any comparable country, and certainly faster than any other European country. So I'm not going to hear any criticism of the NHS or the GPs or the pharmacists or the volunteers or everybody who's worked blindingly hard to get this done as fast as they possibly can. Yes, I think what I think is fair, Emilio, is to say that we now need to go much further and much faster, and in our, asking people to make further sacrifices as we are with Plan B. We've got to step up that booster campaign, and it's got to grow wings. And the pledge that everybody over 18 will get the offer of a booster by the end of January. I want to see us deliver that, and I want to see such a huge rate of booster vaccination in this country that if, as I hope, the boosters can hold Omicron, then we can get back to the road that we were on. That's what we're trying to achieve. And on your other point about the Cabinet Secretary, as far as I'm concerned, he's got to get to the bottom of what he thinks is appropriate and right. But I repeat my view that to the best of my knowledge, everything I've been told is that the rules were followed. But if that doesn't turn out to be the case, then there will be the appropriate sanctions. Yes, as I said in the House today, as soon as possible.
Shall I first go on?
Yes.
Actually, want to add on the wider one. I mean, there are multiple points you put there, and I'll try and give a very brief answer. Short version on pandemic, of course we have to plan ahead, but remember that every pandemic is different. The last pandemic that is as bad as this one, and you can certainly conceptualise very, very bad alternative ones, was HIV, a sexually transmitted infection, completely different way you approach it. So the idea that somehow something you can just take off the shelf and that's your pandemic plan, every single time you have to adjust it according to what you find. This is a very serious pandemic. Second general point is inevitably there have been bumps along the road and things we would do differently if we had done them again. That's obvious. But actually, the idea that a new variant, which we knew was going to come, everyone's been accepting that, is somehow a failure, I think is a misunderstanding of the biology. So speaking as a doctor, you expect problems to occur. When they occur, you address them scientifically and rapidly. And if I can just make one plea on behalf of my colleagues who do the operational side, whether on the NHS or elsewhere, quite a lot of those, I'll put this mildly as I can, quite a lot of those who say, isn't it ridiculous, it's going so slowly, have not got as much experience of running national programmes as maybe they might want to have to make those kind of comments. Actually, these things are difficult, and I think the people who are doing it magnificently, personally.
Yeah, well, I wanted to say exactly that. There are two things I'd pull out. First of all, I think Vaccines Task Force was foresighted to make sure that we had enough boosters for this winter. It wasn't inevitable that we would need boosters, and they got the supply in advance ready to be able to do that. And I think the NHS rollout involving people right the way across the country has been one that we should be proud of, actually. I think it's an operational point, not a science point for me, but I think I look at them and think they've done a great job of getting that out. And you look across other countries and you'll see the booster campaign here has been very effective. So I'd like to thank them for everything they've done, actually, in getting those out, both of those groups. And then I'd like also to say that if you look at the 100-day mission that we published at the time of the G7, that was precisely about trying to make sure all of the parts, from surveillance through to rapid production of vaccines and therapeutics, through to what needs to happen for finance and getting this across the world and equitable access can be improved right the way across the world, so that for any new infection going forward, there is a roadmap to try and get this done more quickly and more efficiently than was possible this time. And so I think making sure that 100-day mission, which the G7 endorsed, is something that really is taken up right the way across the world is going to be crucially important.
Good. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.